what is your analysis of this meeting between Xi Jinping, Putin, and Modi? And will it exert any sort of pressure on US?
India has become what you might call a star power because it stood up to a superpower on principle. India has become an influential power. Now the pushback has started. Countries are willing to stand up. जापान ने भी पुशबैक शुरू कर दिया है. उन्होंने अपना ट्रेड टॉक्स अमेरिका के साथ बंद कर दिया है, रुक गया है, नहीं गया है. तो अमेरिका को मैसेज मिल जाएगा. So many American voices are standing up and saying that President Trump is making a mistake. Trump's trumpeters, they've run out of reasonable and rational things to say. Peter Navarro, who has now become his chief spokesman for attacking India, has not only used a rather quaint and silly phrase like the Brahmins.
Can we trust China?
We have to first.
As we know that talks between Xi Jinping, Putin, and Prime Minister happened yesterday and is going on today also. We saw the US tariffs. Now, to discuss the current scenario and geopolitics, we have with us former Foreign Minister, Mr. MJ Akbar. Mr. Akbar, what is your analysis of this meeting between Xi Jinping, Putin, and Modi? And will it exert any sort of pressure on US to come to the ground, to come to the deal?
Two things have emerged out of this weekend, which you mentioned. Number one, that India has become an influential power, which will, along with other Asian nations like Japan and China, and in fact, you must remember that most of Russia is also in Asia, which will be at the helm of the creation of what Prime Minister Modi has called the Asian century. This has happened. It is one of, if you like, the byproducts of the new respect that India has achieved, because India has become what you might call a star power because it stood up to a superpower on principle, not out of aggression, not out of any fickle behavior, but on principle, that there cannot be two laws in the world. And this really message has resonated. Now you can see the immediate impact of this. You may not have a direct correlation, but certainly you can draw a line. Japan, for example, has now broken off talks with Russia on trade. And that's a very important, has broken off talks with the Americans on trade. It's a very, very important development. It means that now the pushback has started. Countries are willing to stand up. The second point that has emerged is that all of Trump's trumpeters, they've run out of reasonable and rational things to say. Peter Navarro, who has now become his chief spokesman for attacking India, has not only used a rather quaint and silly phrase like the Brahmins. I don't think he really understands either India, Brahmins, or anything else. But also, I think he has made analogies which are completely bizarre. He has said India must not deal with Russia because it's an authoritarian state. He said that just around the same time that President Trump said that he wants to meet Kim of North Korea. I mean, the second, he said India should not talk to China now because China occupied Aksai Chin. By that measure, America should not be talking to Israel because Israel still occupies the territories it took in 1967. And in fact, if you go back into earlier American history, maybe they should break off relations with Mexico, which they took annexed California from Mexico. And Russians still have a problem about Alaska. So I think these bizarre arguments are becoming very, very counterproductive and diminishing the stature of America. And I think President Trump will have to recognize that he has weakened America.
So, sir, what do you make out of this? Like, do you think India, Russia, and China coming together is a real politic right now?
I think it's a very important development because they have shown indications both in their language and in their body language The language that has been used is extremely in diplomatese and extremely careful usage. For example, Prime Minister Modi in his remarks repeated the phrase that was the basis of a new relationship between India and China, which was peace and tranquility on the border. On the border, President Xi has also made remarks that we should keep the border aside and get on with developments, because together we can do far more than we can do individually. I think the vision of a nation century and the talk that President Xi has initiated of a new world order can be brought into some kind of harmony to create a change which will now accelerate. So far it has been almost theoretical. Now it will become practical, it will become potent. And I think the age of superpowers of the 20th century might start to wind down.
So do you think the rivalry has gone? Because see, it's not long ago the Galwan happened. It's not all long ago that they have helped Pakistan in during Operation Sindhu to counter that with intelligence. We should not forget the kind of hostility between the two countries. Do you think that is buried now?
Look, to believe that in international diplomacy or in relations between neighbors, all problems will be sorted out is, I think, nobody who is realistic ever believes that all problems will be sorted out. In fact, India's largest problem is the border conflict along the Himalaya, and the toughest conflict that India faces. The basis of the India-China understanding is that the solution lies in a non-resolution of the border conflict. That means you can hold it in abeyance while you get along with creating a better life for your people, and in fact creating, now that is despite the problems, despite Galwan, despite events that have taken place under every government, right? India-China trade, after all, has shot up. I remember I was in China when Prime Minister Vajpayee was there, and I was in China when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was there, and trade was zero. I think there was to be a joke that, oh, we will now be able to export mangoes to China. Now it is over $100 billion, and in fact much more. In fact, on trade, I think it is very important to remember that the extent of our exposure in trade with the United States is not as much as it made out to be, or as the semantics suggest. Because out of the, say, circa 80 billion trade, I think over 40 billion is exempt in any case. And I am reminded of this because of a statement made by the UAE minister just over this weekend, congratulating both countries on the fact that trade with UAE has gone to over $37 billion. So in the larger perspective, while the relations with America are extremely important, I mean, they are not as dramatically injurious as some of the commentary it might suggest.
But can we trust China? Big question.
We have to first trust ourselves. And
what do you mean by that?
by mean that, we have to trust ourselves to be confident enough to deal with any problems if they come around, right? All foreign relations, particularly under Prime Minister Modi, and in fact under any good Prime Minister, are built on strength. They are not built on weakness. Once you have the confidence of being in your own strength, then you can deal with other nations, any other nations, as on an equal basis, not on the basis of superiority. And nations which start taking on the airs of superpowerdom will be absolutely matched by nations which have the strength to assert their own.
But do you think that relation between US and India are now totally out of balance?
No.
Or it will come back?
There is nothing called either or in international diplomacy. I mean, this is a black and white situation is something that sounds very good maybe on television news. But in reality, the relationships are built understanding that there will be problems. And in fact, one of the great discoveries which people should recognize is the large constituency that India has now in America. So many American voices are standing up and saying that President Trump is making a mistake by injuring and destroying a careful relationship which has been built up over the last 25 years.
There is a criticism that Indian origin CEOs, Satya Nadella and others, are not voicing anything.
No, look, Satya Nadella and so on are
Sundar
Americans.
Pichai,
They are Americans.
Some connection with India, which they have been saying for years.
That's all right, but they are Americans. They will look at the interest of their own companies. We have a sentimental attitude towards them. They don't have a sentimental attitude towards us. And in fact,
that's a correct thing.
yes, and we should
It's a one-sided affair, basically.
Yes. I mean, I don't take their origins to be a very serious factor in their decisions. And they're chief executives of multinationals. Good luck to them.
But sir, in the backdrop of what has happened with China in the past few years, do you think optics will? Don't you see some kind of unease between the this new alignment?
There is no dramatic great leap forward. What we are seeing at the moment is a tremendous improvement on what existed even a few weeks ago. And this is what we should recognize as extremely positive. After all, the whole effort of diplomacy, the whole effort of Prime Minister's foreign policy is to expand the circle of friendship, not to expand the circle of hostility.
Coming back to Navarro, he has been making some very, very strong statements against India. And the last one which you referred to, the Brahmins are profiteering from this. Please, if you can explain us what he meant by that and what is your take on that?
Well, if he was speaking normal English, which I am not totally sure of, then he must have meant that he was talking about the elites are profiteering. But all business in any country is controlled by people who are rich and therefore ipso facto elites. So now look, one of the real problems that Americans have, the reason why they want to preserve their power is they understand that they are vulnerable. First, what is the reason for their vulnerability? Is because their debt now has gone up to $37 or $38 trillion.
But they can't recover it from tariffs.
They are recovering from a huge series of measures by which they want the trade relationships with the world to be heavily in America's favor. Now, let me tell you the second fact, which is what makes them so keen. Some 22% or 21%, around that figure, of world trade is in the hands of America. But of world profits, America has 55%. That is the statistic that you should examine. It's certainly over 50%. And that is the reason for their wealth. Not manufacture, but high pricing. And it is the inbuilt in-pricing which is creating the profits that is financing the strength of the dollar and financing the American economy. That's what they want to preserve.
This casteist, in a way, casteist remark like Brahmin and what Navarro said, do you think his script is written from somewhere else? And do you think our domestic discourse has taken over to US now?
I frankly have no idea whether he writes his own script or not. If he writes his own script, maybe a little jump in IQ would help. If somebody else writes his script, maybe he should change his script writer. But to bring in the elements which India has now, India is an egalitarian democracy, and somebody should send that message to Washington.
Thank you, sir. I will just take two questions in Hindi. ये नवेरो ने कल बोला है कि भारत में ब्राह्मण्स जो हैं उसका फ़ायदा उठा रहे हैं, ये जो सारी प्रॉफिटरिंग कर रहे हैं रशिया से तेल खरीदने का. इस कमेंट को आप कैसे देखते हैं? और दूसरा सवाल, शी जिनपिंग और पुतिन और मोदी साहब की जो कल मीटिंग हुई है चाइना में, उसको आप किस तरह से देखते हैं? एक पावरफुल मैसेज गया है, क्या डीसी में कुछ परेशानी बढ़ी है इससे?
नवारो साहब को तो मैं इंतज़ार कर रहा हूँ कि कब 21वीं सदी में आए. अभी भी शायद वो 19वीं सदी में फंसे हुए हैं। लेकिन अगर उनका मतलब अगर था कि कोई अमीर लोग इसका फ़ायदा उठा रहे हैं, तो स्वाभाविक है कि हर मुल्क में, अमेरिका में तो सबसे ज़्यादा, हर मुल्क में जो इंडस्ट्री या इकोनॉमी या मैन्युफैक्चर या बिजनेस को ओन करता है, वो एक छोटा ग्रुप होता है, वो एलिटिस्ट होता है। तो अगर
तो ब्राह्मण किसको बोल रहे हैं?
वो ब्राह्मण उनको बोल रहे हैं जो इकोनॉमिक टीयर्स में सबसे ऊपर हो। तो सबसे ज़्यादा कैपिटलिज्म की पीक तो अमेरिका में है, सबसे ज़्यादा तो इकोनॉमिक ब्राह्मण वहाँ होंगे। लेकिन मुझे ये लगता है कि उनको अभी के देश की, अभी की भारत के बारे में बिल्कुल कोई जानकारी नहीं है। उनको कोई एक, हम कहते हैं ना शब्द है मुँहफट, हाँ तो शायद उनको ऑर्डर मिले है कि मुँहफट हो जाओ, तो वो अपना मतलब काम कर रहे हैं।
तो ये जो तस्वीरें हमने देखी एससीओ के बाहर, क्या लगता है इससे कुछ चेंज आएगा? जो अभी जियोपॉलिटिक्स चल रही है, या जो चेस गेम चल रही है, या जो गेम ऑफ थ्रोन्स चल रही है जिसको हम बोलें?
नहीं है, इसको अगर आप शतरंज कह रहे हैं तो कह सकते हैं। इंटरनेशनल डिप्लोमेसी थोड़ा बहुत शतरंज तो चलता है, लेकिन आप सिर्फ इतना समझिए कि हिंदुस्तान और चीन के बीच में जो एक चार साल से जो एक मतलब शायद ये रिश्ता कुछ बिखर गया था, और उस रिश्ते को जितना संभालने का काम पिछले 3-4 हफ्ते में हुआ है, उसकी भी दाद देनी चाहिए। क्योंकि हमें चीन के साथ कोई परमानेंट हॉस्टिलिटी तो नहीं करनी है ना। और डिप्लोमेसी का मतलब होता है कि कैसे आप अपने दोस्ती का दायरा कितना आप बढ़ाते रहे हैं। और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने तो जो मैसेज दिया है दुनिया को, जो एक सुपर पावर के खिलाफ खड़े होके और प्रिंसिपल के ऊपर खड़े होके, उसका ये असर है। अब चीन जो है प्रधानमंत्री मोदी के लिए बिल्कुल नई आंखों से देख रहा है कि हाँ, वो अपने देश के लिए खड़े हो सकते हैं। तो जब कोई भी देखता है कि एक प्रधानमंत्री, एक लीडर अपने देश के लिए खड़ा हो जाता है, तो उसकी इज्जत जो स्वाभाविक बढ़ जाती है। जापान ने 69 बिलियन डॉलर का हाईटेक का इन्वेस्टमेंट अनाउंस किया है इस विजिट पे। जापान ने अभी मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा कि हमने लीड लिए, लेकिन फिर भी एक लकीर तो खींची जा सकती है कि अब जापान ने भी पुशबैक शुरू कर दिया है। उन्होंने अपना ट्रेड टॉक्स अमेरिका के साथ बंद कर दिया है, रुक गया है, नहीं गया है। तो अमेरिका को मैसेज मिल जाएगा कि देखो, भारत के साथ भिड़ने की एक असर भी होती है दूसरे देशों पे।
तो बुलिंग नहीं चलेगी?
न, सब प्रश्न नहीं होता है। किसी भी बुली के सामने एक आदमी खड़ा हो जाए ना, एक व्यक्ति खड़ा हो जाए, एक देश खड़ा हो जाए, तो आपको पता चल जाता है कि सही में जो शक्तिमान होता है वो किसी पे बुलिंग नहीं करता।
पर सर, चाइना के साथ खड़ा रहना कितना मुनासिब है? क्योंकि हमें पता है कि किस तरह के रिश्ते रहे हैं। पाकिस्तान का समर्थन वो करता है, हमारे बॉर्डर पे लड़ाई हुई है।
देखिए, बिल्कुल हम ऐसी बात नहीं है कि एक दिन में सारी समस्याएं ख़त्म हो जाएगी, लेकिन ये भी समझना चाहिए कि अभी खबर आई है कि चीन ने पाकिस्तान का एक $7 बिलियन का रेलवे प्रोजेक्ट था, उसको फाइनेंसिंग करने से रोक दिया है। तो हर चीज़ में कुछ ना कुछ, कहीं ना कहीं 100% समरसॉल्ट कहीं नहीं होता है। लेकिन हम अपने इंटरेस्ट को बढ़ाते रहें, यही तो है डिप्लोमेसी का।
थैंक यू सो मच सर।